Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the PG Show, where we talk about all things college football. And today we got to talk about the SEC over/under wins. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know, who do you guys think is going to win the SEC conference? All right, everybody, let's go ahead and let's get into it. But first, I want to go ahead and introduce a couple people. We got Ty from Around the Table Sports, and then we got Jance, and I don't know what your podcast is. I should at this point, but I don't. So I'm going to give you guys a moment to just tell them about yourself and where they can find you at. Ty, you can go first.
Yeah, man, appreciate you having me on. It's always a lot of fun talking football with y'all. You can find me at Around the Table Sports on YouTube. Constant college football content. The month of July, I have done nothing but recruiting content, but the month of August, we're completely switching gears. It's going to go from a ton of recruiting to a ton of season prep. You don't want to miss that. Love to have you a part of the community. And you'll see Jance all the time over there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and you can catch me at Jance. Well, my name is Jance, and yeah, you can catch me at Jance Sports on my YouTube. You can also check me out on Buffalo Fan Base Sports over there. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple. We're on just pretty much every podcast, but we also have our own Facebook, YouTube, and stuff like that. So it's been great working with those guys. Also been going to some Bills training camp, interviewing some players. Just talked to James Cook. So I'm very very, very excited once that kind of gets out there. But yeah, it's been going on with me.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's dive into the first team on our slate, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I feel like this one's going to take up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take a step back and just let you guys know the over/under for this one is 11.5. Alabama lost to Georgia in the national championship last year and went 13-2. Ty, let us know if you think it's going to be the over or the under and why.
Over. And look, yes, does Bama have some things they need to address? Absolutely. That offensive line last year was not up to an Alabama standard. They know this. They've addressed it with a new coaching hire. However, at the end of the day, Jance, you can back me up or disagree with me on this. I've never heard of an offensive line getting better when they lose an Evan Neal, right? Like, I just rarely does it happen, but I will say, going back, watching film, I truly believe that coaching hire Eric Wolford from Kentucky will be huge. He's shown a statistical improvement everywhere he's gone. Scheme understanding is fantastic. Love the hire. But here's the thing, PG. Here's the thing, Jance. What has history taught us about Nick Saban? Revenge is coming. And whenever he loses, that next season is almost a revenge tour. You couple that with the fact that we had that off-season spat with Jimbo and Nick. Oh, this team is going to be coming out the gates ready to go. I don't know if y'all heard Bryce Young talk. He was talking and he was like, what good is the Heisman if we didn't win the national championship? Not in those exact words, but that was the sentiment of what he was saying. That's what you love to hear. And obviously, the Heisman means a ton. Fantastic quarterback. Love that he's our quarterback. But I have to go with the over here just because when you look at it, the Utah State opener, great team, good team, but Alabama's going to win that game. You go into Texas week 2. Look, Texas has got a very potent offense in terms of skill position. I think arguably a top 5 skill position room in all of college football when we're talking tight end, wide receiver, running back. Offensive line's a huge question. What do we know about Alabama? They have Dallas Turner and Will Anderson, and Texas has a new quarterback. Those boys are going to be coming. After that, UL Monroe. I think Alabama's going to be really feeling themselves coming off of the Texas win. They're going to address some things in that Monroe game. It'll be good. Vandy's Vandy. I think that, I can just leave that there. Poor Vanderbilt. Arkansas, though, is a team I really can't wait for us to get into. I love what Sam Pittman has going with the Razorbacks. Your guy, PG, just goes over there and Jaden Hazelwood, and he could be a huge addition for Arkansas, one to watch. But Jance, our guy as well, Drew Sanders, goes to the Razorbacks. That's going to be a huge addition. I was just on a podcast with some coaches, and they were having Drew Sanders as a top 5 impact transfer. That's how much faith and excitement they have about him. Love that. Texas A&M, I can't wait. Jance, I'll let you address more of that. Tennessee's interesting because of what Heupel has them doing, but ultimately, I like Alabama there. To simplify this, if you're asking me the game that I'm really looking at, I'm intrigued about Arkansas. I just don't think that when they lose Traylon Burks, they're going to have the offensive firepower to really be able to capitalize, and this is a more veteran Alabama defense. LSU, though, and hear me out, LSU's defensive front is fantastic. I mean, they are great. The offensive line is going to be one to watch. They're going to have an interesting quarterback battle, but Jaden Daniels, when he's at his best, is a very dangerous passer. They have one of the best wide receivers in the nation, and we know LSU is going to be a very talented team. We just know this. So LSU is the real game I'm circling. Obviously, I'm circling Texas A&M, Arkansas, but LSU is the one that I think if Bama drops one regular season, LSU is one to watch. But other than that, I gotta go the over, man. I gotta go the over.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over too, especially with Alabama. I think one of the biggest reasons why is definitely because of the defense. We got to give a lot of credit to what's going on with the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Pete Golding in this defense, it's been a little, it's been a little complicated as far as what some of our guys in the secondary and the linebacking core has to deal with. For the most part, it's a complex defense, requires a lot of communication, and that's something that we kind of struggled with last year. Bama also struggle with physicality. I mean, for the most part, and as Bama fans, I think me and Ty can attest that was something that in the first half of the season was a little bit of a worry because you never really questioned Bama teams about that in the past. But I think that kind of that turning point after the A&M game, they really became a complete defense where the linebackers were a lot more physical. They started to engage more of the blockers. That was something that was they would try to go around blockers and it would create these gigantic holes. And it's something that they kind of fix. So our defensive line, I think, is going to get a lot better. I think that Byron Young could step up and be that next Fedarian Mathis, Christian Barmore player. I think we have a lot more depth in the defensive line. Would not be surprised at all if we see more players, guys like Tim Keenan and Jamil Burrows, and maybe a Timothy Smith, who had a pretty solid season last year, more as a rotational guy in this 4-2-5 defense. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he takes a big jump. I like the secondary and I like the improvements what's going on there. So I think for the most part, defensively we take a step. Offensively, like Ty said, the offensive line is going to be a little bit of a question mark because when you lose a top 5 NFL draft pick in Evan Neal, it's hard to replace that amount of production he's had there over the last 3 years. But we'll see what Anthony Steen can do. I mean, Steen is projected to be playing at left tackle. We're gonna have to see what J.C. Latham can do at the right side. Emil Ekiyor had a bad season for us last year, but hopefully, again, he lost around 25 pounds. So we're hoping that that he can be a lot more focused and that he can be what he was in 2020, where he was pretty solid. I think Seth McLaughlin will take over the center position, and then I think Javon Cohen will be a lot better as well. So the offensive line is really the only question mark for our team. And I think with Eric Wolford being there, and like Ty said, I mean, every place he's been at statistically, we've seen a massive improvement. We've seen a massive jump when he's there. So I think offensive line will return and hopefully be a key strength for us because we want to be over that line and we want to potentially compete for a national championship. The offensive line has got to be fixed. So I'm not really that worried about the receivers. We're going to be extremely young there. Some inexperience as far as bringing in transfers and definitely gonna have to learn this O'Brien offense, which he has to make improvements as well. But overall wise, I think Alabama is by far the best team right now in the country, and I think that's definitely something that should definitely be on top of the line.
Yeah, Alabama's definitely a top team in the country, and I would take the over on that as well. I mean, I really don't see a game on here that's a for sure loss. I mean, that LSU game, the Auburn game, and the Arkansas game are definitely, could cause Alabama some troubles, but they should be able to go out there and out-talent all of those teams. However, let's get a little insight to this game, though. $259 to go to Texas A&M. That's their cheapest ticket. Come on.
Yeah.
What's up with this one? Are they beating them 55-0?
I'm not going to say that just because, look, Texas A&M's defensive line haul they got is serious, man. And it genuinely does deserve respect. I have a lot of questions about what they're going to be able to do offensively, especially without Calzada, and they had kind of a mess at quarterback. Defensively, though, they're going to have the talent up front. Guys, we know what happens whenever you make Nick mad. I mean, he tends to drag teams in this environment. And I've gone back, I've rewatched that game more times than I'd like to admit. I don't think we're going to have the lapses in understanding of whose assignment you're supposed to block this season that was present last season. At least I hope not. But I mean, I don't know what the line for that game is individually, but that's going to be one I think everybody in the nation is tuned in for.
A&M, see, look, this is the one thing I have to say about A&M real quick is that I'm one of those guys. I'm just going to go on a limb and I say that this team is not going to go. This team's not going to get 8 wins. I truly do believe that this is a 6-win to 7-win football team. I think will take a lot of lapses. I think the defensive line, yes, they got the night. Yes, they got a phenomenal haul, but you lose 95% of your sack production. The best player returning back when it comes to sack is two. When you lose Michael Clemens, when you lose Tyke Johnson, when you lose Jaden Pevy, when you lose DeMarvin Leal, like when you lose a lot of those guys in that front line, that's and again, it's not like Georgia and Alabama where A&M has showed the ability to continue to replace that top tier talent easily by rotating those players throughout the season. No, I mean A&M has not shown the ability to do that. A lot of their core strength on that defensive line that I just named were there for over 3 years of having really really nice production, and I just don't see that being easily. And again, that defensive line, that front seven was the biggest reason why they were on top. Now, I think their offensive line, I think is going to be good. I think it's going to digress a little bit, but I think it should be solid now that you're getting you had some freshman play that I think will get some that had some valuable experience. Again, A&M fans will cheer up. They will cheer up and down and say that Will Anderson was shut down by a freshman. Even though he had 6 tackles, I think he had a couple tackles lost, but I digress. But there's a lot more questions, especially at the quarterback position. What's going to happen there? Is it going to be Max Johnson? And do you have that much faith in Max Johnson? I look at the receiving position. You lose Jalen Whittemire. I mean, you got some talented freshmen that are tight ends, and we did see we saw Brock and we saw Michael Mayer and what they can do as freshmen. But do we really truly do believe that A&M has the depth that can replace it under this offense where a tight end as a freshman could excel? I mean, that's something that we're going to have to see. Evan Stewart. I think Evan Stewart could be a nice piece, but who are going to be your outside guys? Anais Smith was your leading receiver last year as far as returning production, but we all know what type of role that they're going to be placing him in, and I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of people are going to try to eye out for him. So I have a lot more question marks about A&M and just again losing for 2 years in a row now, losing the massive amount of production that they had last year. And now you're instilling all this freshman talent or guys that have never had experience into there without, again, A&M has never shown the ability to replace that production at a high level like Georgia and Alabama. So, I look at A&M and I don't think Alabama's going to win the game 55-0, even though that score has actually happened during the Kenny Troy era. But for the most part, I'm one of those guys that I think A&M is extremely overrated. I think that again, I think they are set around 8.5. I would not take that at all. And I just, for me, I think that this is going to be a rebuilding year for them. I think a lot of A&M fans, very similar to Miami fans, have pretty much are going to set themselves up for failure about the expectations. I've heard from A&M fans that they believe they're going to go 11-1 or 10-2, and I'm like, I think that's ridiculous. So I think A&M fans, just very similar to what LSU fans and what Miami fans are doing right now, they're setting their teams up for failure. I feel like the expectations should be a little bit lower, and I feel like A&M will not meet those expectations.
It's gonna be fun to talk about A&M here in a bit.
It will be fun to talk about A&M. All right, well, let's move into Arkansas. And this one I think is an interesting team because they could be a really good team this year. But I see 7 wins on here. And then the rest of them, I'm like, all right, they could struggle in those games and they could lose them. They have a pretty tough out-of-conference schedule with BYU and Cincinnati. I mean, they do have Missouri State and Liberty, but Liberty's not a pushover either. So right now, the line on that one for the Arkansas Razorbacks is currently at 6.5. They beat Penn State last year in the Outback Bowl. So,
Jance, I'll let you go first on this one, man, because I am riding the line on Arkansas. I mean, I want to say over, but just ever so slightly.
Yeah. Oh my God. So here's the thing about Arkansas that I like about them. I like that they've kind of laid a foundation. I think Sam Pittman knows the strengths and weaknesses of his team. I think that Sam Pittman is one of those coaches where he knows he's not going to get a top 10 or top 5 recruiting class just based upon the area. And I think it's going to take some time for that to happen. I think that the way that their offense is kind of ran and just kind of the play style that they're doing right now, I don't think it's it's a playing style where I think you need that top tier talent, right? I think if we can go back to 2011, 2010, where they had where Arkansas was the top rated offensive team when they were just known for just kind of their system and kind of their ability to spread out to their receivers and to their running game, that I think that was more suitable for a lot of wins, especially in a conference that was still fresh to the type of playing style back then. And that's when Arkansas was getting quarterbacks like Ryan Mallett and a lot of those guys out there, and they were making Sugar Bowl appearances. I don't know if I can see that with Arkansas. I think Arkansas is kind of in that same lineup with Baylor, where you want to trust Baylor. You love the coaching staff. You love the foundation that's there. You know exactly what you're going to get. However, do they have the talent to sustain that type of play? For not just for years to come. And I don't know if Arkansas can do that. They have I think they actually have the toughest schedule in the country. I could be wrong about that, but I do know they have one of the toughest schedules in the country. And I like Bumper Pool. I like KJ Jefferson, but that offense was heavily focused on Treylon Burks. Without Treylon Burks, and again, you lose some of your best running backs to the transfer portal. I love the physicality of the offensive line, but do we really trust KJ Jefferson to really elevate his play to get that team to over the line? That's just something that I'm just not sure of right now, especially with that type of schedule that they're really dealing with. I would not be surprised at all if Arkansas does take a step back, not just because the coaching was not good or the players didn't really buy in, but just because maybe the talent level has maybe kind of caught up with them, and maybe they do need some years to kind of try to get that to get it retooled, get it refocused.
Yeah,
So
and
do you
I'll
think
say this before Ty goes, but I still think 6.5 is really low because look at their schedule. 4 games away, all the other ones at home. And they've got Bama, A&M, LSU, Ole Miss. Am I crazy to think that they could potentially only lose one of those games at home? I mean, they gave
So,
Bama a
Jance,
run for their money last year in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, like I said, I can see them definitely, get around 7 or 8. I would not be surprised at all if they can do it, only because I love the coaching staff and I love the foundation that was built with Arkansas. It's just, again, my question with them is that can they sustain that level? And I even question that with Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss won 10 games last year, and I even kind of had that question with them, is that, because this is the conference that lives off of the talent, right? It lives off of it compared to other conferences. And I just kind of worry for Arkansas is that can they sustain that level of play like they did last year going into this year?
look, the reason why I'm glad I'm glad Preston. I just had watched your interview with Parker. So yeah, I'm glad Preston you asked that question because I completely agree with Jance based off that answer. Right? Do I think Arkansas is the over on 6.5? Yes, but ever so slightly. And I mean like 7, because I think he said it perfectly. I don't think that it needs a lot of expansion. Arkansas, I love what they have at quarterback, but the hits they've taken at wide receiver, it's notable. Do I like Hazelwood? Yes, very much well so. We haven't seen Hazelwood at his best because of his injuries, and that's putting a lot on a very talented wide receiver, but someone who's now making a new entrance in a new team with a new offense. So I love Arkansas. I love what Pittman's doing there. I think they're a fun team. I think they're really cool. But I mean, I think they could take a step back from last year while still going over.
Okay, well, let's talk about the rival to Alabama. Is it safe to say the thorn in Alabama's side? Because we know Auburn's beat them a couple times and prevented them from going
Only
to a national championship.
only if it's in Jordan Hare. If it's in Tuscaloosa, I'm not worried about it. But if it's in Jordan Hare, I'm scared. I'm scared to death. I don't know what they be doing over there with that toilet paper and the voodoo. I don't know what they be doing. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on there. But thankfully, he's not going to be in Jordan Hare this year.
Well, they're set at 5.5, and I think this is about right. And they could honestly not even hit that mark. There's a good chance that they fire their head coach mid-season. So they lost Bo Nix. They did get Calzada out of the portal, but I think Bo Nix is a better quarterback than Calzada. So step down. But what do you guys think about this one?
Man, I think I could go on the under on this one. They lost some talented pieces, right? Like this offseason has not treated Auburn well. They're not doing very well in recruiting right now. And let me make sure before I say that, because the last time I checked, they were not doing well. But ultimately, look, when we look at Auburn, they have to replace a quarterback. Bo Nix was inconsistent at best, right? I mean, we'd see Bo Nix make drives, plays that looked great. We'd see Bo Nix do the exact opposite the next series.
Yeah.
Zach Calzada is kind of an unknown guy, right? Like he had a fantastic game against Alabama, and it always seems to be that way, right? Where a quarterback just plays out of their mind against Alabama. But outside of that game, like it's not like Zach Calzada was that dude the rest of the season. He showed you what he can do, but at the end of the day, I think I can go in the under for Auburn. I just think there's so much going on there. And look, right now, they're sitting, what are they sitting national? They're sitting 67th in the nation in recruiting right now,
Yeah, they're
right?
not doing good.
I just think that things right now are not looking good for Auburn. So I'm going to go with the under on this one.
I'm gonna I'm gonna say over. I'm gonna say over. And I think a reason why I'm gonna say over was because I look at last year with Auburn and kind of the situation that was kind of going on with them. I mean, Auburn. I mean, I think a lot of people kind of forget that even though they went 6-6, was that for the most part they started off 5-2. Like there was a time where they were 5-2, and a big reason why was because of the defensive play. And one thing that even as a Bama fan, I gotta admit, Auburn always has a defense. They, for the most part, besides really the last couple of years, they always produce top 10, top 15 recruiting classes, and the talent there, it's always been pretty underrated. It's kind of Auburn's one of those teams I like to call kind of a Russian roulette team. You don't know what you're going to get out of Auburn because when the bullet fires, I mean they're hitting. I mean they're hitting and they're hitting extremely hard. But their defensive front, I like Kobe Wooden. I like Derek Hall. I mean, those are two guys that could honestly be first round picks. Wouldn't surprise me if one of them are. Their secondary is going to be if they're their secondary is going to be nice. They're going to they have some returning talent there. It's just offensively that's the biggest question mark, and that's just something that I just think that it's something that may plague them. That may kind of a lot of people may see Auburn and see is 5.5, is that, should we take the under, should we take the over? I think that's the question because we saw that, I mean, that offensive line in the second half of the season was really struggling. I mean, they were really, really struggling. You look at the receivers. I mean, you lose your best receiver in Kobe Hudson. He's gone. So, and it's like, do we really trust Zach Calzada? And if he loses the job, are you going to trust TJ Finley? Are you going to trust Dudley from Hoover? I mean, who's going to be the quarterback? Because it might not even be Zach Calzada that's going to step up and be that guy. So I do have some questions about their skill position and talent. They really had to rely on the transfer portal last year, and they, and everyone. It was to a point where everyone thought that Demetrius Robertson was going to step up and be the guy, even though he was a 6-year player and he did not live up to those expectations. So there's some questions and concerns, especially with Tank Bigsby and Hunter as the guys that really were. I mean, that literally was your offense, was Bigsby and Hunter that were the primary guys of carrying the ball. And granted, I mean, Bigsby's one of the top running backs in the country, but even we saw in the Alabama game that, listen, you can't just simply rely on Bigsby and Hunter in order for you to win football games. There's other areas that you need to attack. You need a passing game. You need the ability to be versatile. You cannot be a one dimensional. That does not work in today's college football, especially if you don't have the talent level, that maybe in Alabama or Georgia can have. So, you know, I think the question is that even with a serviceable quarterback, will they still live up to that line? Because you can have serviceable, but you don't have the weapons on the outside. You got the running game, but again, that's only going to take you so far. And I think that's a big reason why Auburn struggled last year, second half of the season, because teams really figured out that they were a one-dimensional offense. They figured out how to play against Bo Nix, and when he got hurt, then you had T.J. Finley was in the lineup, and then it was just curtains from there. So one part of me is saying, I trust this defense. That's one thing I will trust. I will trust this defense. I trust that defensive line. They will make headlines. But on the other side of me, can I trust the offense to get me over? So I'll say it for now. I think they can. I think that they can. They barely will get it. Auburn always has a difficult schedule every single year. I think a lot of fans that are just looking at this year and saying, well, they have a tough schedule. They always have a difficult schedule. They play the same schedule almost every single year with some tough non-conference opponents. So I'll give them that. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'll give it up to Auburn for at least trying to schedule a tough out of conference opponent in Penn State. There's a lot of teams that don't want to do that and then try to slip into the playoffs. So let's go ahead and let's transition into Florida at 7.5 wins. So this one's really intriguing to me because I don't think Florida's that good, and they're struggling in recruiting as it is. They lost in the Union Home Mortgage Bowl to UCF, which I don't know what's up with these bowl names at this point. Like, I feel like they're just reaching. But let's be honest, Florida fans will probably say they didn't want to be there in that game anyways. So I don't know. I'm probably going to take the under for Florida, but I want to hear what you guys think.
Well, look, Florida is just an incredibly interesting team to me this year. I want Billy Napier and them to do something, but I have to wonder, how ready is this team right now? I mean, we saw the Florida defense, and it was better than the year before, no doubt, but it's still got work to do, right? You have a new quarterback situation in Anthony Richardson, who is a phenomenal athlete. I mean, if he gets it together, wow, he's going to be dangerous, one of the most dangerous weapons in the SEC. But you're going to put a lot on him, right? I think the one thing that helps Florida is if you look in some of their transfer portal acquisitions, they were able to get some pieces, such as a Montrell Johnson coming over from Louisiana. I think that's a huge win for them. But they also lose a tight end. They lose a wide receiver. So
Mohamed
Florida,
Diabet left too. They're the
yeah,
best outside
yeah. So,
linebacker in Michigan State.
yep. So Florida is in a position to where, look, if you look at the schedule, they start against Utah. Kyle Whittingham has Utah humming right now, right? And that's going to be an extremely tough game. Like, I I don't know that I'm comfortable even saying I think they win the opener against Utah, because I think Utah is in a really good place right now. Kentucky is another team to watch as well. We talk about Auburn having a difficult schedule. That's not an easy opening two games if you have a brand new coaching staff, if you're trying to get everything, and if you're really trying to make the strides. So, out of all the teams in the SEC this year, Florida is one that I'm probably the most intrigued on, because they have some talent, but are they going to be able to make the strides, and are they going to be able to hit the over? That's going to be really, really tough. At least they don't have to play Alabama this year, because I mean, they'd just be stacking it. But instead, they get Texas A&M. Instead, they get LSU. I mean, those are some tough, outside their division of the SEC opponents to roll the dice on. Jance, I'm really interested in what you're thinking about Florida.
I like Florida's offensive line, and I think I like some of the trench play that they're getting. They got Torrance, and they also got Walters there, which were some of the highest rated guys from the transfer portal on the offensive line. So they're really, that was definitely something that was a little bit of a struggle for them. And it was also weird. Florida was just a weird team last year because they went from having the high powered offense like we saw with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney and those guys to then kind of running more of a power scheme type of team. They were more of a power scheme type of team, and for half the season they were one of the best rushing teams in college football. I mean, they almost ran for 300 yards against Alabama, and that was, I mean, the craziest part was just their physicality. I mean, these guys were so physical against Bama to a point they were pushing these guys 2-3 yards off the ball and creating gigantic holes, and our linebackers didn't want to engage. So I thought Florida was going to be easily a 8 to 9 win football team and be one of the best rushing teams in the league, especially with the type of running core and the talent they had. But I mean, they had no passing game, and it's just that was the killer. They kept rotating guys. We didn't know who was going to be the guy there. A lot of people thought that AR-15 was going to take the job from Emory Jones, and then all of a sudden we kind of found out, how raw he. I mean, again, he's a phenomenal athlete, and if he can live up to his potential, that dude could be the next Cam Newton. But he was raw as a quarterback. I mean, he was kind of just a one read guy, and if he didn't see that read, he was going to take off. So that's a player that I'm really interested in seeing if he can improve. Is AR now, because he changed the surname. Wanted to take the 15 out of it, but so it'll be interesting to see what AR can do. And just his improvement overall as a quarterback. Again, I do like the fact that they're making the offensive line better. Defensively, you return back Britton Cox, but again, I have some questions about your secondary. You lose a big piece in Kiar Elam to the Buffalo Bills. For the most part. So I have some questions, especially with Billy Napier. I mean, these Florida fans are impatient with Billy Napier,
Oh
especially when it
man.
comes. Oh yeah, especially when it comes to recruiting. Now they're getting better. I mean, yeah, I think they're ranked 14th now, according to 24/7. But for the most part, these Florida fans they're impatient. They want results. They do not want to go back to being a 6-7 win football team. They want to go back to competing for national titles and SEC championships. And I just, it's like for me is that Billy Napier and the mess that he kind of inherited for Dan Mullen, just the way Dan Mullen kind of treated that program towards the end. It's going to be hard, honestly, for them to try to get that, especially that, again, I have some questions about your skill position. I think the running attack will be fine. But, for the most part, will it be better than it was last year? And, again, what are the improvements from AR? Like how good of a passing quarterback can he get? So I know their line, I think it's set to 7. I don't know if honestly I would take it. I think that's one of those teams that even though they're competing in the SEC East, they are dealing with a pretty difficult schedule and a team that is, they're rebuilding. So, Florida is just one of those schools, man, that very similar to Auburn is that you like some of the things that are built that are going on there, but with the fans and kind of just implementing a new coach and there's always problems. They're always in the headlines. Just not sure if I should take it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're hitting the over on that one. I just don't see it. I think Billy Napier is going to be a good coach, and I think he's going to get Florida back on the right track. I just don't think it's this year. I think their schedule is too hard. I think Tennessee, Kentucky, Utah, A&M, Georgia, LSU. I even think Florida State might give them a pain. I think Florida State's pretty much on their same level. I think Florida and Florida State are on the same level right now. Maybe not in terms of recruiting, but on-field play. I think they're kind of putting out the same product. And so I definitely think playing at Florida State is going to be a really tough game for them this year. So
Yeah, one thing before we move it on, I want to hear from both of you on this because Jance, you bring up an interesting point about the impatience at Florida right now, and I have to wonder. I know there's no obviously it's part of it, but I wonder how much. You have another guy in your state who's just making his entrance into the state, and Mario Cristobal, who's lighting the recruiting trail on fire. That's happening right in your backyard, and they're both Saban disciples, right? So it's like both of us got a Saban disciple, but they're over there hot as can be. I mean, easily. Who are you arguing has had the best July in terms of recruiting? If you're talking about that, you have to talk about Oklahoma. You have to talk about Miami. You have to talk about Alabama raising the way they did. Right. And so Billy Napier is sitting there and he's got a team that has had as good of a July in recruiting as anybody right in his backyard. That pressure, how much of that do you think is contributing to this real impatience we see out of Florida fans right now?
Ty, I'll say this real quick. If they lose Kamani McLean, they're going to lose their minds. Florida fans will demand him. I wouldn't be surprised at all that if Kamani commits to Bama or if he commits elsewhere, if Billy Napier gets fired the next day. Lakeland, for those who don't know, Lakeland is Florida's, that is right there. That is Florida's backyard. If there's one school that you want to try to get that Florida is pretty much guaranteed to at least get one player to go to Florida, it's from Lakeland. It's right there. You look at their history, look at players like the Pouncey brothers, you look at Jeff Demps, Chris Rainey. I mean, all those kids, man. I mean, they came right from Lakeland. So it's that. I mean, the amount of pressure that's on Billy Napier this year, I think it's undeserving, really, because Dan Mullen left him with a mess that he had to inherit, and you have to compete with Miami with Mario Cristobal, who's known that Miami area, and we talked about this before on not that long ago, but when you look at Mario Cristobal's staff. And it's not just their reputation as coaches, but the areas that they're from and the areas that they garner so much respect and so much attention from the parents, from the kids. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, Jason Taylor, who's a Hall of Fame, who's going to be a future Hall of Famer player. I mean, he coached. I mean, his son was at St. Thomas Aquinas. He coached at St. Thomas Aquinas for 3 years, so he knows the coaching staff that's still in place there. He knows a lot of those kids that are still in there. So that's a hot spot for the Miami Hurricanes, right? You look at some of those other coaches at Carroll City, at Northwestern, at Booker T. Washington, right? At Miami Central. a lot of those schools around that surrounding area at Jones and Orlando, which is another Florida area, which again, so these coaches, I mean, they have a hot, I mean, these coaches have a hotbed everywhere else in Florida where Billy Napier is trying to establish a not just a viable coaching staff that can get along with the current roster and can get those guys to improve, but also focus on the recruiting trail as far as getting coaches to recruit and hit certain different areas, and where they're not really finding that much success because because of the Miami, because of Mario Cristobal being from Miami and being from the inner city and pretty much garnering the respect and the attention that those people have. I mean, that's just hard to beat. That's hard to beat coaches that already have the reputation in the areas that you're trying to recruit. That's hard to get. So, Billy Napier, I think his back is against the wall right now, and I think that this is going to take some time in order for Billy Napier and this staff to not just get it going on the field, but off the field. But like you said, I mean, the problem is that the Florida fans are so impatient. They are very impatient. So I think that Billy, his back is against the wall right now.
Yeah, Florida fans need to be careful about being impatient. They need to look at what happened to Texas and look what happens when you have impatience and you don't allow your coaches to get a full 4 years and a full cycle in there. You're not able to get the right guys in there, and your culture is constantly changing. I will say this, and this is, I think, the one thing, regardless whether you're a Florida fan, a Miami fan, or a Florida State fan, that you have the right to be upset about, regardless of who your coach is. How the hell, excuse my French, do you have all of these college Division I schools in the state of Florida? You have the talent that comes out of Florida. You have three top 10 guys this year in the 2023 class out of Florida, and you can't lock down your own state, and Florida State, and Miami can't dominate that territory. That's what Florida fans, and that's what any Florida college fan should be able to be upset about.
Yep, and that's why I said the biggest win for Miami recruiting this summer isn't any one player. It's how much success they've been able to generate in Florida relative to what they had before. Great point.
Yep. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's pivot into the University of Georgia, which, speaking about recruiting, I want to know what's going on with their recruiting and how they're losing players in their own state. Not even just, I'm not talking 3-star guys. I'm talking 5-star guys. I think when I looked, the top 4 guys, they weren't even, I don't think they got either of the top 4.
Bama has 3 of the top 4.
Yeah. So their over-under is 10.5 this year. What'd they lose? 15 guys to the draft. I think Georgia, I think they might be in a little bit of trouble. I think they're probably going to cover at 10 to 11 games, but for the future, I think they're in a little bit of trouble here.
Look, I think they're going to cover. And the reason is because as much as I love what's going on in the East, and it's so interesting, Preston, because just a few years ago, you'd look at the SEC and it was like the East, if you're not talking about Florida or Georgia, there's not much to talk about in the East, right? Tennessee was down. It just wasn't happening. And now Tennessee's growing. South Carolina with Beamer and Rattler, they have a pulse. Florida is in an interesting position, but the East is getting better. The reason I think they can cover is because, one, we know what Georgia is able to recruit like, right? And look, yes, they lost all those pieces, and that's going to be a huge mountain to overcome, something they haven't had to do at that degree yet, but they recruit at the highest order in college football, right? They've just been able to stack top 5, top 10 classes, so they have the talent. But at the end of the day, this is a defense that, while being talented, has lost a lot of experience, and that's where I'm really, really interested. I'm also very interested into how this offense is going to progress, because as much as, they relied on the defense, breaking in all the new faces on the defense is going to cause a more reliant team on the offense. How's that going to look? Yeah, I get it. Stetson Bennett, he's not necessarily going to be the reason he wins you or he loses you a game, but now he might have to be the sole reason you win a game this year for Georgia if they get in a shootout. And I'm just very interested to see what that looks like. But at the end of the day, look, Georgia, I can't even say I'm worried about their recruiting, and maybe that's far-fetched of me to say, but it's just one of those things where I've seen you finish with such a high recruiting class for years now, even before Kirby, even with Mark Richt. They recruited at such a high level. It's going to have to be one of those things where you got to show me at the end of the year, you know what I mean, that they've not been able to recruit. But I think Georgia's an interesting team. I just still think relative to the other teams in their division, they're more talented. And if you look at the schedule, they're more talented than every team they're going to play this year. So because of that, I think I like Georgia to cover.
I'm gonna take the over as well with Georgia, and I think a big reason why is because even though the SC East is getting better, I think I look at the talent discrepancy in coaching, and I think it's just higher than everyone else. I think that for the most part, this offense it needs to get better. I don't think that again you're gonna rely on the defense to really save you. I mean, this defense was absolutely unreal, and just again, even though Georgia's offense was underrated because they scored 40 points a game, I think a lot of people kind of forget that this offense scored over 40 points per game. Well, just at 40 points per game. But this defense was the main reason why they won that national championship. So I think Kirby's smart. He's even addressed it. He knows that you can't just rely on your defense this year. If you're going to win a national title, you're going to need this offense. You're going to need this offense to really help you out. So when I watched their spring game, and I just watched their spring game yesterday as well, I get excited for them because these guys were running a lot of 13 personnel. I mean, these guys were running 12, 13 personnel and using their tight ends, which is their biggest strength. I mean, Georgia arguably has not arguably they have the best tight end room in the nation. Three guys that I think could really step up for them. You look at Eric Gilbert, you look at Brock Bowers, who was the best tight end in the nation last year, and then Oscar Delp, who's been receiving so much praise, and a guy that I look at that spring game and I'm like, okay, this reminds me a lot of what Brock Bowers was able to do. So I think Georgia, for the most part, they're gonna utilize their strength. They're gonna utilize the talents on the field. I look at the offensive line; it's gonna be extremely strong. Cedric Van Pran. Amarius Mims sliding in at tackle, which again, I look at that national championship game and oh God, I was just mad. As soon as I saw him in the game, they slid Jamari Slayer inside. I just knew the game was going to be over. But Amarius Mims is going to be a potential first round pick. The offensive line is going to be one of the best in the nation. Their running room is going to be great. Stenson Bennett's not going to throw for 4,000 yards. I don't think Georgia needs him to throw for 4,000 yards, but they do need his productivity to be up a little bit more. So defensively, they're going to be fine. I mean, this is a team unlike A&M, which a lot of people think that A&M is going to have a top tier defense. Georgia rotates a lot of their players. Georgia has proven the fact that they can lose a bunch of players and still be productive. I think a lot of people forget that after the 2020 COVID year, Georgia lost a lot of defensive talent to a point where everyone thought that they could potentially regress. I mean, again, when you look at, they lost around 7 guys from their defense, and what happened? Georgia had backup players come in and stepped in right away, and they became first round picks. So I'm not really worried about Georgia on the defensive side of the ball. I think it will take a little bit of a step back because maybe they lost way too much productivity on their defense. But they've also with that coaching staff, they've also proven the fact that they can replace that talent. And still be a very capable and be a very refined defense. So I think offensively is going to be the question mark to see whether they can step up to the plate, and I think they can. I think you look at you look at the offensive scheme that's going on there. I think I look at their key strengths and knowing that they're going to utilize those strengths with those tight ends. Their running room is going to be fine. Their offensive line is going to be fine. And if Stenson Bennett, if he's not the answer, I think you have another capable starter in Carson Beck that can take in the reins as well. So I got the over for Georgia. I don't see anybody in that SC East that can dethrone them. I'm not going to sit up and say that they're going to be undefeated, but I would not be surprised. Maybe they suffer an upset loss. But this SC East division, even though it's stronger, I don't think any team is in there is going to is really going to usurp Georgia and really replace them. So I got Georgia with the over.
Yeah, and Georgia's got to be careful for that Oregon game because Oregon went up there and beat Ohio State last year in Columbus, and that game's a neutral site game. I don't remember where it's being played at, but I know it's a neutral site game.
Atlanta.
So it's in Atlanta. Okay, so it's a home game. But yeah, Georgia needs to be careful about that first game. That could be the one game that gets them. Otherwise, they're probably going to roll through that schedule. So I mean, unless Vandy goes 12-0, because
Well, hold on. Let's not discount that.
All right, let's go to another.
I wouldn't discount if Franklin was still there.
All right, well, let's move to another team in the East, the Kentucky Wildcats. And this one actually has me at a shock. They have the over-under for this team at 8.5 wins. And I know last year they won 10 games, but man, Seems like people are really high on Kentucky. And I just want to point this out. I think South Carolina is going to be a very good team this year. So for a lot of these teams, I chalk South Carolina up as a loss. So just to put that in perspective, but I don't see Kentucky repeating the year they had. But man, 8.5 wins. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I could see them hitting 8.5. Look, I'm looking at this schedule, and it's not a particularly grueling schedule, right? I mean, Miami of Ohio, they're going to win that game, or they should win that game. If they don't win that game, we have other things to talk about. Youngstown State, they should win that game. Once again, you don't, we have bigger issues. Northern Illinois, right? Ole Miss. Now, granted, Ole Miss is, Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, but they no longer have Matt Corral, right? And their quarterback there, he didn't look as maybe in tune as people wanted him to. Now, I think it's always way too early for us to say that the quarterback's not going to be good. Jackson Dart came in there. He didn't have a good spring game, but once again, how much of the offense did he really grasp? I'm always going to give the benefit of the doubt when a player hasn't been in a room for a full year, right? I think that's just a good rule of thumb. But Ole Miss is, I think, a very beatable team this year. They don't care about defense whatsoever, and Zach Evans is really the guy I'm looking at Ole Miss. South Carolina, once again, who are they going to be? I love where Beamer is taking them, but what does that look like this year? So, as weird as it is to say that I could take the over on Kentucky, you just look at this schedule and there's not a whole lot of threats there. Do I think they're going to repeat at 10 wins? Not particularly. But at the same time, like, I just think that they have a very winnable schedule, and winning 8 games this year, I don't think I'd bat an eyelash.
So I take a look at Kentucky, and I look at and I'm looking at the roster, but um, Kentucky is one of those weird teams, man, where I think that they're a little bit more talented than Arkansas is. Right? Kentucky is a team that nationally they recruit top 25, worst case scenario top 30 every single year, even better than Arkansas. I look at the job that Rodriguez is just doing there, and he's done a really, really good job of kind of really just laying his foundation and laying really the type of things that he expects his team and they expect his coaching staff to do. And Kentucky, they've had success. You know, they've had some down years in between, but they've actually had a lot of success in the SCEs. Um, Will Levis, I think that 8.5 is there because of Will Levis, and I think because he's going to be a projected first round pick, not really because of how great he was of a quarterback he was, because I don't think he was a great quarterback at all last year. I think that was an offense that was predicated around Wan'Dale Robinson. I think Wan'Dale Robinson and their rushing attack with that offensive line was their biggest responsibility. So I look at this Kentucky team, and yes you have you have one of the best running backs in the country, but you also have an offensive line that is going to lose some production, and then you lose Eric Walford, who was responsible, in my opinion, for that offensive line. Just looking at before Eric Walford was there and after when Eric Walford was there. You also lose a couple guys in Darren Rosenthal, who's now in the NFL. You lose some NFL productivity off that line. Defensively, I think that's the question mark and maybe something that I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to if I go back and watch some Kentucky games and just seeing, because Kentucky's defense wasn't bad, but there wasn't really anything. I didn't see like a Josh Allen on that defense or Bud Dupree on that defense that just, okay, yeah, this is the player that can help propel that defense to being top tier. But again, it wasn't a bad defense at all from them. So I look at the SCs, and I think that for the most part, I think South Carolina will get better. I think Tennessee will get better, and Tennessee had a pretty underrated season as well last year. Georgia, we all know that they're going to be a top tier team there. But then you look at the rest of the SCs, you look at Florida, you look at the Missouris of the world, and that's where you're kind of looking like, maybe Kentucky has that chance because this is, I mean, I look at Kentucky's schedule, it's not that difficult of a schedule, but if this was around 7.5, I think I might take it. I think 8.5 is a little bit too much. But you mean Will Levis? I'm not really sold on Will Levis. I mean, that's a guy that for the most part, a lot of his productivity came on bubbles and in the flat and intermediate routes. What about his ability to throw to throw the football deep down the field and his accuracy there? What about again? That's a guy that for the most part, when the pocket was closed down on him, he was a little trigger happy. He didn't really have any great pocket presence. I think again, it's more of a projection because he's 6'5", 230 pounds, and he can run the football very similar to KJ Jefferson, that they're forgetting the losses that they suffer and the people that were responsible for that offense being great. The offensive line is going to take a hit. You're losing you're losing one of your best assistant coaches in Eric Walford. You're losing one of the best players in the nation last year in Wandale Robinson. How are you going to? Are there any players on that roster that can replace the productivity that Kentucky had last year? And again, even though I just talked about this, even though Kentucky and has had some success over the last 5 to 6 years, in between those years, they've also had down years when they went from winning 9 to 10 games to then the next year they're winning 6, 7 games. And a big reason why, because very similar to what I talked about with Arkansas, they don't have the level of talent like an Alabama, like a Georgia, like an LSU, where they can constantly replace that productivity. They don't have that type. They don't have that type of roster in place for them. Maybe not yet, until maybe they have to establish something there. Maybe something with NIL could be done about it. But they don't have the talent that can replace that level of productivity every single year like those top teams like Alabama and Georgia can.
All right, well, let's look at Mississippi State. 6.5. Last year they were 7-6, lost to the Big 12. That's typical for an FCC team, right? Yeah, that's jokes. I don't know. I mean, they are playing the best one-loss team in the country. What do you guys think?
So another one that's very interesting because look, Will Rogers had a really solid freshman campaign with Leach. He's going to be better, right? I have every reason to expect he's going to be better. And this is not a very difficult schedule. Look, Memphis is a real team. Memphis is a very good team. They typically have good teams. So that's one to watch. I think that's going to be a fun game. But you look at Arizona. I think that I like Mississippi State to beat Arizona. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but we'll see. I don't think they beat LSU. Bowling Green, they beat. I don't particularly think they beat Texas A&M only because, and to look, Jance brought this up earlier. Texas A&M, they haven't shown the continuity of being able to develop defensive pieces, but the one thing they have done well is defensive line. Right, like it hasn't been at the level of Georgia and Alabama, but they've at least had extended success at defensive line. I like some pieces they have there, and I just think Texas A&M can get them. But outside of that, right, like the only other teams I look at and I'm like, those are guaranteed losses are Georgia and Alabama. Mississippi State just doesn't play enough defense, right? And for Alabama to lose to them. Because yes, maybe they can score a bunch. No, they can't stop Bryce Young and them from scoring either. And likewise with Georgia. Maybe Mississippi State can score. No, you can't stop Brock Bowers and them boys from scoring because Brock Bowers and them, they are, Jance is right. That tight end room is sensational at Georgia. So, oh man, I think that they could repeat the season they had last year at a 7-6. I think that's about where I see them. So in that aspect, I will give them the over from 6.5.
I'm looking at this Mississippi State football team, and I like Will Rogers. I think Ty's right. I think he's going to get better. But this is an air raid offense that has not really proven that. I mean, surprisingly, even though it's an air raid offense and that it's an offense predicated to the pace, to their pace, and really, having one of the most difficult offenses to stop, they really haven't been that good of an efficient offense scoring wise. Like they have not been that efficient. So I look at Mississippi State and I just look at them and again, they don't have the talent to really handle teams like Georgia and Alabama. Since Mike Leach has been in college football, I don't think Mike Leach has scored 21 points on. I don't even think he's even scored 14 points on Nick Saban. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, now again, Mississippi State actually did a pretty good job against Georgia. Under the circumstance, especially a couple of years ago. But I mean, I look at this Mississippi State football team, and defensively, I don't really see it there. Their offensive line was not good at all last year, and their best player was Charles Cross, and he's now with the Seattle Seahawks. So you lose you lose your best your best blocker on an offensive line that was already horrendous. The rushing attack, we all know that's going to be eliminated because of the style that Mike Leach presents. And then I look at the receiving room, and it's like, are these going to be guys dynamic enough to really cause problems? And it's just, is the air raid, is it dead in the SEC? I think that's the biggest question because it's proven not to really work that efficiently. It's proven is not really been as consistent as Mike Leach thought it could be. Now it is year 3, and we're gonna have to figure out what's been going on with them. But from a talent level perspective, I mean, Kentucky has more talent than them so far, and Kentucky has proven to have success. We've seen that LSU, Bama, Georgia, South Carolina has done a great job with their recruiting over the last 2 to 3 years, and they brought on some really good transfers for this year. So is Mississippi State, are they ahead of a lot of those teams in their own division, or are they behind? And I think what we're seeing so far is that teams are getting better. Teams have shown improvement, while Mississippi State and Mike Leach has shown that they're kind of stagnant right now. They're kind of, they have an idea of what they want to try to be, but they can't really do it because something's holding them back. Maybe it's talent. Maybe it's the fact that maybe there's just not players that are buying into the system. But I mean, maybe that is it, because Mike Leach, he has to recruit players that maybe in the high school level has been under a very familiar system. And I think that's why it worked out so much in Washington State and Texas Tech, was because he recruited players that played under a very, like, as soon as they came in, they were extremely comfortable with how the offense was ran. So I think that this may be a process for Mike Leach as far as recruiting and getting the players that can fit this. But it's hard to really do that in a conference which relies so much on its talent. So it's just very similar to Kentucky and Arkansas. I think Mississippi State's one of those schools that they've annually been a 6 to 7 win football team. I don't even know if I honestly going to take it. Honestly, I think I actually might go under here a little bit there, only because the rest of the division's getting better, and I just don't know the direction that Mississippi State is headed right now. I think that they're just pretty stagnant. So I think I'm actually going to take under with that.
Yeah, and the more I sit here and think about it, I think I said I would take them at 7 wins. I'm just sitting here really thinking, listening to you, Jansen. I'm not even comfortable giving them 7 wins, right? Because, like, look, they do Arizona, cool. Bowling Green, cool. East Tennessee State, cool. Maybe Ole Miss, cool. But outside of that, it's just like, man, those are all losable games. So, yeah, I think I might have to go the under on this one. I'm going to change that, because the more I think about it, I don't know. I think there's way too much movement in the SEC.
Yeah, and the future for Mississippi State's definitely up in the air as well. With OU and Texas coming to that conference, I think Mississippi State's probably going to be a bottom feeder of the SEC. Um, I just don't think they're going to have the special seasons anymore, and I don't think they're going to continually beat teams like OU and Texas. I mean, adding 2 more teams into the mix like that, I definitely think Mississippi State's just going to start being a down team. They're going to be one of those teams like what we're about to look at in Missouri, where it's like, okay, you can chalk that up as a win. And so, speaking of that, looking at Missouri, they're at 5.5. They went 6-7 last year and lost in their bowl game to Army. I feel like they got a pretty hard schedule this year, having to play Louisiana Tech, go to at Kansas State. You got to play Georgia. They're going to have to go to the Swamp, but they got to go to Carolina. Tennessee is going to be tough. They got to play Kentucky and Arkansas. I don't see them hitting 5 wins this year, but I don't know. Ty, what do you think?
Yeah, look, they got some pieces recruiting that I'm very interested in what they're going to be able to do, but I don't know that it's necessarily enough. Now, that being said, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they finish as like a top 35 class, Jance? Am I correct in
I think
saying
I
that?
think I think it was outside. I'll check real quick, but I think they were outside of it. I think they actually finished 40th. But I could check real quick just in case.
No, in 2022, they finished in 15th.
Okay.
They got in Luther Burden, the 5-star wide receiver.
That's right.
He was
That's right.
their only top 300 prospect. So, look, Missouri is a team that I would love for them to do something. They did do some work in the transfer portal that I think is going to be nice, but is it going to be enough, right? I think that if you're Missouri right now, you're really relying on the transfers you've brought in to do the heavy lifting. And look, one thing we can say is in college football, we've seen transfers be able to do that. You look at Michigan State. You even look, I mean, just anywhere, right? You can pick out transfer portal guys who've made tremendous impact. But to your point, Preston, I look up and down this schedule, and it is not an easy schedule. And like Jance has been saying, you have so much movement in the SEC, right? And like I talked about earlier, in the SEC East alone, I like a lot of the teams getting better. Do I think that they are at Georgia's level right now? No, there's still a pretty big gap, but there's movement. And Missouri, I'm going to use your word from just a second ago, Jance. There's a little bit of stagnation there. And so this is going to be a really interesting team in the SEC. And it's, to your point, Preston, a team that is probably wondering what their future looks like when a Texas and an Oklahoma get into the SEC.
Yeah, I'm gonna say UB because Missouri got a couple transfers from UB. Shout out to Stevens and Poger, but Missouri, man, I mean, it's just one of those. It's just one of those teams that, and even then, you look at some of their best players. I mean, you look at Mekhi Wingo, he's at LSU, and that was by far their best defensive lineman. He's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, Missouri has just taken hit after hit after hit as far as just their production. They did again. They got Luther, which is great. But again, very similar to what Evan Stewart's going to have to play with A&M. I mean, that's a kid that is a freshman. He's not only is he going to get the playing time, but he might just be their primary number one guy. Not because he's just that good, but just because Missouri just doesn't really have the talent to deal with it. I have some questions about their quarterback position. I have questions about the offensive line. Their defense, for the most part, was subpar at best. And again, I mean, just, we keep saying it, man. Ty just said it a minute ago, but the SEC East is getting better. I mean, there's just so much movement going on in that division that I have Missouri going 4-8. So I definitely will take the under for them. I think that, again, very similar to Mississippi State and Missouri. It's just, I don't really see the movement there. I think teams are getting better. And, Missouri, I mean, you look at their transfer portal, they got 11 guys from the transfer portal. And a lot of those guys were just, I mean, a lot of those guys were either high 4-star recruits that are just waiting for an opportunity to start, or they were just backups. Like Stevens was a starting tight end for UB, but he was primarily just a blocking guy. So, it's like Missouri, they're rebuilding. They're trying to find an identity right now, and it's something that they're gonna take a hit for a while.
All right, well, let's go ahead and let's look at Ole Miss. You guys obviously aren't as high on Ole Miss. They've got the 7.5. They did lose a lot. They went 10-3 last year, lost to Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. Now, I necessarily don't think they would have lost that game if Matt Corral would not have gotten injured, but they definitely made some good pickups in the transfer portal this year with Michael Trigg and Jackson Dart, along with Zach Evans, who was a highly touted 5-star recruit out of high school. Where do you guys think Ole Miss realistically lands? I think that they can win at least 8 games.
So, look, the thing with Ole Miss is we know Lane Kiffin is going to be able to do something with the offense, right? Even though Corral's not there anymore, I still have some level of faith that the offense is going to have some level of competency because you're talking about Lane Kiffin. And look, no matter whether you're a Kiffin fan or not, it's a brilliant offensive mind. What's that defense going to look like? Because they have a new defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinators over there. So Ole Miss is interesting. You look at their schedule, you love who they open up with because it's like boom, boom, boom. I think that they can easily capitalize Troy and Central Arkansas. Georgia Tech is interesting, but Georgia Tech loses Jahmyr Gibbs, right? I mean, he was the juice to that team. We know what Georgia Tech runs offensively. You lose a running back at Jahmyr Gibbs' caliber, that's going to hurt. Tulsa's a good team, man. Tulsa's always fielding pretty solid teams. I don't know what they're looking like for this year coming up, but I know growing up, they've always been decent, not terrible, but it's a team to watch. I don't think that they're going to beat Ole Miss, but regardless, it's a team to watch. Outside of that, though, I think the only other games that I think I like them in is Vanderbilt and maybe Mississippi State, but that's it. Jance, what are you thinking?
So Ole Miss, they did get some players in the transfer portal. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, you got Jalen Robinson from USC, Zach Evans, Jackson Dart. I mean, Troy Brown, Michael Trigg. I mean, they got players. There's no questioning about the talent that Ole Miss got from the portal. For me, there's a lot of questions because again, when you get a lot of players from the transfer portal, you gotta focus on continuity. You gotta focus on building chemistry. And I think that there's going to be an adjustment. I think there's going to be an adjustment period for a lot of those guys that are going to have to learn to completely do a new system. Because I think a lot of those guys will eventually start because they just don't really have the talent to really replace the productivity that Ole Miss had last year. So I think there's going to be I think there is going to be an adjustment period for them. I think their offense is going to be really, really good, But, again, losing a quarterback in Matt Corral, who was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country, that's just not going to be easy to replace, even with Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart is extremely talented, but I think it's going to take some time. I think that this is going to be a little bit of a slow process. And, again, as good as a coach as Lane Kiffin is, as great as offensive mind that he is, Ole Miss also had a schedule which really wasn't that difficult of a schedule for them last year. Now again, they play in a very difficult division in the West, but LSU, for the most part, normally they're a very competitive team in that West. A&M went 8-4, and you guys know how I feel about them. But I think the West was kind of a little bit of a down year for last year. Even Alabama, in terms of the standard that they had, was a little bit down. So, I don't know. I look at Ole Miss, and I think that they can get 8. I think I might stick with you, and I think that they can get the 8. Uh, but I do have a lot of question marks about them. Is that, again, can they make those adjustments in their second season? Is Ole Miss going to be a football team that can consistently compete in the SEC? That's just something that we're going to have to find out and see what they can do. But there's no questioning that Lane Kiffin is going to get that offense straight. I think that there might be, because I think a lot of people are underestimating Jeff Lebby a lot. I think a lot of people are underestimating him. I think that Lane Kiffin was just the man responsible for building that offense. I think Jeff Lebby definitely had a lot of insight, and I think he deserves some credit for what he was able to do on the offensive side of the ball for them. So I think that they can take a hit there. But overall wise, the offensive line for the most part is going to take a little bit of a hit. Their rushing attack, I think I have some questions. They do lose a couple guys there, and I think Connor and Ely are actually gone. So I could be wrong about that, but so you do lose some rushing production there as well. So I think Ole Miss will be a decent team. I don't think the SC is going to have that much movement to a point where Ole Miss is going to win 6 to 7 games, but I think 8-4 I think is a reasonable mark for them so far.
Hey, I'm sorry to do this, but speaking of rushing production, we have some breaking news that Jance, you're gonna love to hear. 3
Oh,
5 stars in 1 week for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide as we just landed Richard Young.
Oh,
oh
Bro.
boy.
Oh.
People, this is not
Whoo, it's
scripted.
getting nasty in
This ain't
Tuscaloosa.
scripted, ladies and
Ooh.
gentlemen. This ain't scripted.
Okay, yeah, things are getting fun in Tuscaloosa. Hey, speaking ooh, it's about to get nasty. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of expected that you guys were going to get Richard Young, but I was kind of holding out that the superstar DeMarco Murray could pull off one last Sooner Magic miracle, but I guess not.
Hey, DeMarco Murray. It's such a cool addition to Oklahoma. He's such a good recruiter, but man, I'm happy about Richard Young to Bama.
The rich get richer. I said it the other day with Caleb Downs. The rich get richer.
Shout out to Justice Haynes.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I'm in a real good mood now. I might not have AC in this room. I might be sweating, but I am happy as can be right now.
Oh boy. All right. Well, let's move into it. We only got 4 more left, and we should be able to truck through these last 4. But South Carolina, they have them at 5.5. I'm really high on South Carolina. Spencer Rattler's best year at OU was with Shane Beamer. He's got Austin Stogner, one of his favorite targets, out there with him. I think South Carolina is a 9 or 10 win team this year. I think a lot of people are underestimating what South Carolina can do with Shane Beamer and Spencer Rattler. But let me know what the SEC folks think.
I'm definitely going to hit the over. Right, look. They went 7-6 last year with next to no consistency at quarterback. So whenever you're giving them a 5.5, I'm going to go over. How much over? That's a totally different question. But I definitely think that with the addition that they got in the transfer portal with Spencer Rattler back with Beamer, I think they're going to win over 5.5 games. I don't see that going to be a big issue. How much over? I don't know, because they play Clemson every year. So it's not like they get another cupcake game. One of their non-conference opponents is one of the best teams in college football perennially. So look, yeah, but I have South Carolina with the over.
I do too. I think there's no. I think if listen, if you're gonna take the under, I think you're either a South Carolina hater, you might be a Georgia fan, or maybe a Clemson fan out there that's gonna sit up there and take that under. But No, they're definitely doing. I like the improvements that they've made, especially getting some great players off the transfer portal. Again, I think the question is how much over. Like, I don't think they're going to win 9, 10 games, but I would not be surprised if this is maybe a competitive 7-6 football, a 7-5 or 7-6 football team, or maybe an 8-4 football team. Best case scenario for them. They definitely got talent. I love the general direction that they're getting. They're gonna have a lot of offensive productivity coming back. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the nation returning back for you. That's going to be a projected first round pick. I mean, from what I've been hearing from a lot of these South Carolina fans, they love the direction that Beamer's taking them. They love the foundation that he's laying, and I think that's the most. When you're trying to rebuild the program, that's the most important part is setting a foundation, living up to those, and living up to what you're setting. And I think a lot of those players are buying in. The fan base for sure is buying in. This is the most excited I think I've seen from them since going all the way back, going all the way back to around 2010, 2011, and so I'm excited for them. I think they'll definitely hit that over. And I think that very similar. I think that the East will be stronger. And I think you'll see some teams like Mississippi State and Missouri kind of fall. And you'll see some other teams like South Carolina take that next step into to a point where I think they're going to be definitely going to be competing for a bowl game for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited for South Carolina, and I'm just excited that Spencer Rattler gets a fresh start after what happened last season. I think he's going to be maybe a top 10 draft pick this year in this draft, and he's definitely a dark horse to go win the Heisman. So I know a lot of people aren't high on him, but he's there. So the next step is the Tennessee Volunteers, and man, they're killing it in recruiting, and they had a decent, sneaky good season last year. With their schedule this year, they could have another sneaky good season, especially with holding Alabama, Florida, Kentucky at home. What do you guys think of this one?
So they're projected at 7.5. I think that Tennessee is a team that continues to improve. I think the thing that hurts them is that they have a lot of chaos right now. Whether or not this staff had anything to do with it, you've been in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, and there's a lot of chaos going on. So while I think that Tennessee is going to be a continually improving team under Heupel, I don't necessarily see them winning 10 games. So if we're saying the over is 7.5, I might take them for 8 wins, but I mean, we have to look at where they come from. Ball State, I have that as a win. Pittsburgh not only loses their quarterback, they lose their Biletnikoff winner wide receiver and their offensive coordinator, who, look, there's some contention as to the offensive coordinator at Pittsburgh. We just heard Pittsburgh's head coach come out and speak out against Whipple. But inevitably, I think Tennessee wins that game. Akron, I think that's a W. Florida, that's up in the air to me. I don't think they beat LSU. I don't think they beat Alabama. I know they beat UT Martin. I think they can beat Kentucky. They're not going to beat Georgia. They're going to beat Missouri. South Carolina is another one that's up in the air, and then they're going to beat Vanderbilt. So depending on how you feel about those up in the air games, that's how I look at Tennessee. And look, maybe even LSU is a bit up in the air, but I just think LSU has so much talent, man. Like, even though they lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal, sure, LSU is one of the few teams in the nation where they've got so much talent stacked that if they lose those guys, there's more dudes behind them. So I think I'll go over, but ever so slightly.
I think I'm with you. I think I'm gonna take it over, but just a little bit slightly there. I like the direction that Josh Heupel is taking with them. I like Hendon Hooker. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the SEC but in the country. I like the way that their offense is kind of set to let some of those guys on the outside kind of excel. I think that's the difference. I think between a team like Arkansas with KJ and Kentucky with Will Levis is that even though that you look at their ceiling, they have a much higher ceiling than Hooker. The way that their offenses are predicated, I mean, those guys. I mean, Arkansas was around Burks, Kentucky was around Robinson. I mean, Tennessee was around 2 to 3 guys there to a point where I think a couple of those receivers actually got drafted. I know Veals, he got drafted as a 4th-round pick from Tennessee. So Cedric Tillman, their best receiver, is going to be back. I think that there's other weapons at the skill position player that they can definitely kind of fill in the void. Their offensive line is going to take a hit. I mean, you lose guys like Cade Mays. I mean, it's just like that. They're gonna lose some productivity off that line. So there's definitely some question mark there. You lose some rushing productivity. I do like some of the defensive guys, not Bama Byron Young, but Tennessee's version of Byron Young is a very, very good player in the interior there. Banks is a really good player. So Tennessee, I think that they're one of those teams that are going in the right direction. It's just that, are we living off of the hype of Tennessee from basically what they did last year, and we're projecting them to all of a sudden to be this 8 to 9 or 10 win football program? Or, again, should we really think about, okay, they were a really good team, but they did lose this amount of players and they did lose this amount of productivity that was responsible for their team? And who are some of the backup players that can step in, or some of the freshman recruits that can step in and take in that role? And I think that is something that is kind of sticking with me, and I'm still in a way kind of thinking about whether, if not, because I have Tennessee potentially being one of those teams that can beat Georgia. I think that could potentially happen, just the way that their offense is set up. And I think that Tennessee is starving to beat one of their rivals, and because they just haven't done, especially against Bama, they haven't beat Bama since, I think, since '06, either '06 or '07. So it's no, yeah, it's one of those years, either '06 or '07. And again, I don't want to go back to those years, but that's just how long it's been since Tennessee has beaten Bama. So they're starving for one of those wins. I think that Tennessee fans are extremely excited and they're buying into the process that Hugh is spilling. I think the players are definitely buying into the process. They got Nico, who I think is the best quarterback out of this class. So the momentum that's going right now for Tennessee is definitely trending upward to a point where I can confidently say that in the future, maybe, who knows, the outlook 2 to 3 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Tennessee shocks the world and maybe they can become a contender, because we've seen it before when they were trending up, but basically off of the recruiting and based off everything that was going on. And it was to a point in 2016 where they were a top 10 school when they were undefeated until they went against Bama, and the Bama crushed their hopes and dreams. But I regress. I mean, for the most part, Tennessee is a program that's just been starving, very similar to Texas, for a long time, and they're going in the right direction. It's just that, are we really kind of are we kind of overrating them a little bit, or is Tennessee maybe that team that could maybe compete with Georgia for potentially the SEC's crown?
No, I think Tennessee's there. I think a lot of people look over the NIL factor for Tennessee. Nashville's got money, so let's go ahead and let's move into. Did we talk about LSU, or did I skip over Brian Kelly and his Southern accent?
Yeah, I think we
I think we
got to get
skipped
that.
right on over it.
Well, let's cover LSU just real quick, because I think their schedule is pretty interesting. I think they could actually make a lot of noise in the SEC this year. They're playing Florida State. That should be a win. Their first slate of games, all the way up until maybe that Tennessee game, they should win all of those. I think the only ones that you could say are a loss on here are Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. I think are a toss-up, but every other one, I think realistically, LSU should be able to just breeze through. They should be able to out-talent everybody else.
Yeah, and look, they didn't have a great year last year. We all know this, but we don't know necessarily all the chaos that went on behind closed doors, right? Like we do know some things that happened at LSU, such as Ed Ogeron having people at practice and allowing them to reportedly participate in drills when they weren't on the football team. So from all reports, it sounds like the Ed Ogeron era at LSU was focused on everything but football once that national championship had come. Now you have Brian Kelly. Say what you will about Brian Kelly, but he's been successful, right? Like, I mean, he has been a successful head coach. LSU's so talented. If you're giving me a 7.5, asking me whether I think they go over or under with this schedule, I think it's got to be over. I think it's got to be over. Florida State, dub. Southern, dub. Mississippi State, dub. New Mexico, dub. Auburn, it's at Auburn. To Jance's point, anything can happen in Jordan Hare. I don't know what witchcraft they've conjured there, but who knows? Tennessee, that's going to be a fun one, right? I think I would like LSU to win that game if it was played tomorrow, but inevitably that's a fun one. Florida, I think LSU is going to win that one. But at the same time, it depends what Anthony Richardson's looking like this deep into the season. Outside of that, the only losses I have you having are Alabama, Arkansas, Texas A&M. So I think LSU is a very interesting team.
Yeah, there's no questioning that they should definitely go over with that schedule. I mean, the talent.
Should.
I mean, if they fail to even get to that, then there's serious problems going on over there, because I mean, when you look at their talent level, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, despite LSU, I think, winning around 6 games, because I don't even think they played in their bowl game, but despite them winning the amount of games that they did last year, they still had over 10 draft picks. So it just tells you that the talent that's just continually there, that they continue to produce, is just absolutely outstanding. And remember, LSU, I mean, they also dealt with a lot of issues. They dealt with off the field issues. They dealt with the Ed Orgeron situation and what happened with him during the offseason and going into the season. They also dealt with a lot of injuries. I mean, it was to a point during the Bama game, they missed like 7 defensive backs, to a point where they had to get walk-ons against the Bama game to come in there, and they almost still beat us. So I mean, there's no question that the talent that LSU has is absolutely incredible. You look at the defensive line with Mason Smith, B.J. Ojolari, Ellie Gay. I mean, Jaquelin Roy, and the rest of those guys there. I mean, that defensive line, it might just be one of the best in the country. You know, their secondary, they got a couple guys from Arkansas that I think could potentially make a contribution. Maybe not as good as what they were in the past, because Corey Raymond is, he's gone. I think he's at Florida. Is he at Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
He's
So yeah. I mean, yeah. You lose one of the best, if not the best, defensive back coach in the country. So I think there's going to be a little bit of drawback there from the productivity from their secondary. But they do get some guys returning back there as well. So I'm not really going to question their secondary that much. I think it can be. I don't think it's going to be great, but I think it's going to be good enough. Right. I think it's going to be good enough for them to kind of hold. You lose Ricks to the portal. Derek Stingley's gone, but again, they didn't even play. They played more than 3 games last year, and then they were gone. So I think LSU can be fine there. Again, offensively, we'll see what happens about their production, whether it's going to be Jaden Daniels, whether it's going to be that 5-star recruit that's going to be there. We're going to have to figure out the quarterback situation. Tyron Davis is gone off. We'll see what happens there. The offensive line is the biggest question mark by far, because, I mean, the offensive line, it was horrendous last year. So they need to get a little bit better there. But Keyshawn Butte, Brian Thomas, Kirkland, those guys, I mean, the talent that LSU has, there's no question that they should definitely win over 7.5 games, especially with the amount of issues that they dealt with. And I was even impressed by just the competitiveness that they had last year, that LSU could have easily been a 9-1 football team if they just didn't really let some of those key issues distract them. But there's no question that they should definitely be over. If they should definitely be over. If they can't, that's going to be a problem that I think LSU fans will have, because they've been fairly. I mean, we talk about impatient fan bases. They've been pretty patient so far with Brian Kelly. So, if they can't meet that expectation, something's going to go down in Baton Rouge.
All right. Well, I'm going to hold Texas A&M off for the very end, but I want to talk about Vanderbilt. And I asked somebody this question the other day, and I want to hear what your guys' opinion on it is. Who is the worst team in the Power 5 conferences? Is it Vanderbilt, Kansas, Arizona? It seems like they're always bottom feeding over here. And so what's your guys' take on that?
I certainly don't think you'd be wrong saying Vanderbilt, at least not right now. I mean, they're not very good. I mean, goodness gracious, you look at this, you would hope they could beat Hawaii. I don't have confidence that they'll beat Hawaii, right? Like, I just don't know. God forbid they lose to Elon. I just don't know what happens then. They're not beating Wake Forest. I just don't know universe I see that in. Are we comfortable saying they beat Northern Illinois?
Northern
I'm
Illinois
not.
is actually going to be good this year for the MAC. They're going to be a good football team.
Hey, and remember, their head coach said that they're going to be the best team in the country here soon. So 12-0.
Yeah. So I mean, Vanderbilt, they've got so much to work on. You give them 2 wins, you look at this and you're like, well, if you beat Elon and if you beat Northern, there's your 2 wins. But the best case scenario, I think, for Vanderbilt, and I truly mean the best case scenario, I see them winning 3 games. That might be harsh, but like that, and I'm not saying that's what I'm saying that's what I think would be about the best thing for Vanderbilt is winning 3 games. Jance, what do you think? Because
I got the under for that.
Yeah, hey, I'm trying to give them the best case scenario I can think of, and in that scenario, I'm like,
with.
I got you at 3.
They don't have anything. All their best players are transferred. They're transferred. They're gone. They're gone. Their best player in Steen, who was an all SC conference player, is at Alabama now. So, it's like Vanderbilt. The quarterback situation is questionable. The running back situation is questionable. The receiving. I mean, this team is depleted. It's depleted,
The
and
football team is questionable.
yeah, it's like they might beat Elon, but they're losing to Northern Illinois. I think Northern Illinois will blow them. I think they'll blow them out. Northern Illinois is a really good football team going into the MAC this year. Wouldn't be surprised at all if they go back and win it, especially against my Bulls, if we'll even get to the conference championship. But it's there's no question. There's no question to me that Vanderbilt. They just have so much to work with, and it's not really fair to anyone who's coaching that team. It's not really fair to the players because you can't help who you're playing against. But it's just it's like one of the things that I honestly wish could happen is that, like soccer, how they have a regulation thing. We got to have regulation here to a point where Vanderbilt's going to have to be forced to kind of be kicked off this conference because this is ridiculous. But they have. I mean, I think they'll maybe a win, but it's just they're depleted so much, and it's just thanks to the transfer portal. I can't even talk at Vanderbilt. It's just I got the under for that.
They lost to East Tennessee State last year.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
I just looked it up. They lost to East Tennessee State last year. Hold on, let me just switch to 2021 real quick so you guys can see how abysmal this season was. 62-0, 42-0. Oh wait, they almost got South Carolina there. Woohoo! I mean, all of these are games just.
Oh God.
They lost to Stanford, and Stanford's not very good.
I feel bad. It's like ever since Franklin left that because they were on the up when Franklin was there, and then he just I mean they were buying facilities. I mean they were getting recruits. I mean they were getting top 25 classes, and then he just leaves, and then it's been downhill ever since.
Yeah, I don't even know if Vanderbilt is in the same class as Kansas. Because Kansas can at least give you 2 or 3 wins a year. I don't. Vanderbilt might get one this year. And their head coach coming out and saying what he said. I know he's trying to give some hope around that program, but dude, you got to be a little bit more realistic. You guys aren't going to be the mecca of college football. So, all right, Texas A&M, 8.5 wins. That's where they're at. I don't think they're hitting it. I think they're going to be lucky to get 7. I don't think they've got quarterback issues. They're not going to be able to play all these defensive linemen they recruited this year. They're going to have a mass exodus in the transfer portal. Their recruiting class sucks for 2023. So I've got them at 6 or 7 wins. I've got them on the under.
Look, I would love to sit here and be over, but I can't. I can't look at Texas A&M and say I'm going to give them the over. I think the only area where Jance and I differ, and it is ever so slightly, I might have a little bit faith in their ability to be successful on the defensive line. I'm not saying they're going to be the defensive line they were last year. I'm just saying that if there's one area Texas A&M has shown me they can keep a guy, it's in that area. But it's not enough, man. It's just not. They already had woes at offense. You introduce a situation to where we don't know who the guy is at quarterback. But I mean, you look at the spring game, and I'm never going to judge anything off of a spring game. I said that earlier, but the quarterback play left a whole lot to be desired. You look at the weapons they're going to use and how they're going to use it. To Jance's point, I think we kind of all have an understanding of how Anaya Smith is going to be used. He's a gadget. He is a thorn in the side of any defense, but that's going to be expected. They are going to be keyed in on him because of the threats he can present. Evan Stewart is Evan Stewart. He's a 5-star wide receiver. Love his game, but he's a freshman, right? And he's going to be going up against teams that, look, A&M painted a target on their back, whether they realize it or not. But like when you recruit at the level Jimbo just recruited at, 8-4, I mean, it's not going to be good anymore, right? Like Jimbo and them, they've been able to kind of coast. Whenever you get the results you just got, coasting does not work anymore. And I don't know, man. I think I think they're going to beat Sam Houston State, obviously. They'll beat Appalachian State. I think they'll beat Miami. So in that regard, there's 3 wins. I think they'll beat UMass. But, I mean, look, Miami is even a questionable win, right? Because Tyler Van Dyke is very, very good. Is that offense going to be humming enough to where they can take on Texas A&M? But other than that, I have serious questions in a lot of other games.
Yeah, well, and look at their schedule at Alabama, at South Carolina, at Auburn. Like, those three might be a loss for them. And realistically, you got Mario Cristobal at Miami. He's going to have those guys ready to play. And I know you said Evan Stewart, but who's going to throw Evan Stewart the ball?
Exactly.
And,
No doubt.
yeah, and, their defensive line, like, it looks incredible. But again, I don't see these guys being happy, rotating out all the time so that you can, play them all. I don't know.
Well, you guys know exactly how I kind of feel. I think they're 6-6, 7-5. That's what I got. Definitely got the under for that. And this is my question about this. I'm looking at that Appalachian State game. Will they win that game? Because that's a good Appalachian. That's a really good Appalachian State football. That's a team that could shock some people. That's a team that could shock. They've been pretty good ever since they've been joining the some of the higher tier conferences. So I don't know. Will they win that game? I'm not too sure about it. And then you look at the Miami game, loss. I got Miami blowing them out during that game. I just Arkansas. I think that's a loss. Bama. I think that's a loss right there. South Carolina. I mean, I look at that stretch, that 7-8 game stretch, especially toward the middle to the end of their season. It's just too tough. I think it's a gauntlet. I think they're definitely going to be going through a rebuilding year. And like Ty said, this is A&M fans' fault. This is your fault, A&M fans. You did this. You set your team up for failure for what they're about to become. You did this, Jimbo Fisher, because there's to a point, and this is scary, guys. This is not even funny. This is scary. A&M fans actually truly do believe that they're going to go 11-1 this year. They actually believe this. So I mean, this is no. So they have done this. The reason why the line is so big is because they beat Bama last year. Everyone knows it. But you replace all that production, 95% of your sack production, your linebacking position, even though you return Johnson back, that wasn't a strength. And the reason why that they were pretty decent last year was because their defensive line with Jaden Pevy, Clemens, Tyke Smith, and DeMarvin Little was able to hold up their end. I think their secondary, and I've been pretty consistent on this. I think they're gonna have a really, really nice secondary, but there's only so much you can do without having an efficient pass rush. So there's some question marks. So there's going to be some question marks I even have there with the secondary. But I have no idea what your tight end situation is going to look like. You got some very talented 5-star guys. But, I mean, again, people want to look at what Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer was able to do because they were freshmen and think, oh, well, because they can do it, we've been it. Well, if I'm not mistaken, A&M had Baylor Cupp, who's a 5-star guy. What did he do? Absolutely nothing. And that was a 5-star recruit that was even higher rated than Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers. So it's not even a for sure thing that their tight end room is going to be that good. The receiving room is questionable. Your quarterback room, and again, spring, so we got to take into account, but it was absolutely horrific. It was one of the worst spring game performances I've ever seen from a quarterback room in my lifetime. It was bad. So there's just a lot more question marks I have about there. They have to replace some of their coaching staff. That's not going to be easy to replace. And again, at least at A&M, we have not seen Jimbo Fisher replace his coaching staff. I mean, it hasn't really happened yet, so there's going to be some questions about that. There's just more questions I have with A&M compared to any other team in the country. And I think, again, the reasonable expectation is maybe 7-5, maybe 8-4. If the line was set at 7.5, I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe I can take that. Maybe that is a little bit reasonable. But A&M fans have done this. That's the reason why their lineup is 8.5. They have set their team up for failure to a point where they actually truly do believe that they're going to at least win 10 to 11 wins. So it's sad. I'm disappointed in the A&M fan base. I get it. Again, we're all fans of college football and we all want to support our teams and we all want to have these expectations for them. But I mean, this is crazy. This is ridiculous to a point where they actually truly do feel like this is going to happen. I think they're going to set themselves up for failure, and very similar to the LSU situation, very similar to what Miami fans are going through right now. It's going to crash down on them.
What's the over-under for players to enter the transfer portal from Texas A&M this year? I've got it at least 5. And I think they're going to lose. If they only win 6 games, they're losing Levius Overton. They're losing Dindy. They're probably losing Stewart. I don't know about Nolan, But I think for those three, they're going to lose them. Because Dindy and Overton weren't even sold on Texas A&M right away. Like, they were late additions to that. And so was Stewart. All three of those guys were late additions. And Stewart was looking heavily at Miami.
Yeah. Look, that's a good question. I think it all depends on what they do this season, but you got a lot of people you got to appease right now. And Jance has continually made the point. They don't rotate at the level that other teams do. So what's that going to look like? I don't know, but I mean, look, it's the transfer portal era. I think we'd be naive to think that they're going to go 4 years without losing anybody from this class. I just don't think it happens, especially when you stack that many dudes on the defensive line. So I think that, look, it's probably a good chance someone leaves from that defensive line. Who's the question? But I mean, you can't feed all that many mouths.
Yeah, and the one thing and the reason why Alabama is so consistently good every year and the reason why they're favored to win the Natty this year, or I don't know if they're favored, but they're definitely in the top 3. And then the reason why they're favored to win the SEC championship is because they don't just recruit one position like the defensive line. Like, they recruit all of them. And then the next year they re-up on that position, but they don't overstock a position to the point of they've got guys that are going to leave. Like, and I think that's what Texas A&M has done. They've gotten so much talent built up at one position that you can't keep all that talent there. They're going to leave. But now you're going to have other positions around your team, like your quarterback position, where you're going to have a hole, and you probably could have recruited it a little bit better instead of recruiting more defensive linemen.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Bama did have a position. Jance, I'll just say this, and I want to hear what you. But that outside linebacker position for Alabama, there's an argument that's the deepest position group in the nation. Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, 2 5-stars. Then you look behind him. Chris Braswell is a former 5-star. Jeremiah Alexander's a former 5-star. Jaleel Campbell's a former 5-star. And then you're not even talking about Keanu Cott, who's a top 100 player. You're not talking about a Quindarius Robinson, who's a top 100 player. That outside linebacker room for Alabama is unbelievable. And that's after they lost 5-star Drew Sanders. That's after they had 4 5-stars just sitting and waiting for an opportunity. But the difference in Alabama and A&M, Bama's rate of development makes your head spin. They've shown there's a reason why you sit at Alabama. Josh Jacobs was never the primary running back except for 1 year and was a first-round draft pick because that's what Bama can do.
He wasn't even the primary. Damian Harris was number 1, Najee was number 2, and then he was more the gadget guy. He was more of a gadget player.
Point being, right? You look at Christian Barmore. You get 1 solid year at Bama, you can be a first-rounder. That's why Bama can stack talent the way they do, because they've proven time and time again, give us 1 year, you're going to the league. That's all you need, 1. And Nick Saban's vote of approval, you're good. You're going to be playing Sundays.
And I'll say this real quick, because this is the problem. This is something that is very common in college football. We are, as fans, we get so excited based off of 1 year and based off what we do during the off season, that all of a sudden we have these huge expectations that are going to be set in precedent realistically we all know it's not going to happen, but because of what's been going on during the offseason, all of a sudden we just expect this team to really elevate their style of play. And sometimes it works, right? For Bama, a lot of people were high, even though we went 7-6, we were so competitive in a lot of our games. So even though we lost to Monroe that season, we were still extremely competitive in a lot of the losses we took were 1-score games. I don't think we got blown out that particular year. So when we went 7-6 and we had the number 3 recruiting class going into 2008 and we dominated, we destroyed Auburn as far as competing for the state. We had these huge high expectations, but nobody was saying that we were going to make it to the SEC championship national title game. At least I don't remember that. A lot of people are saying, well, maybe we can win maybe 9, or maybe ceiling can be 10 games. Maybe we can compete this year potentially for the West Division. But I'll even say this: we exceeded what we were going to be in 2008 with the roster we had. We did not think that we were going to make it that far. A&M fans actually truly do believe they're going to win 11 games this year. That they're going to win the West, beat Bama, and compete for a national championship. They believe this, and it's because of it's for two reasons. Number one, because they beat Bama, which is why I think the line is set the way it is, and why they're set 3.5. Number two, though, and I can add a third for this, but number two is because they're high off of that 2020 year. They're so high off of that year when they went 9-1. And they will tell you this because I was in some Twitter spaces with a bunch of A&M fans when they were saying this with Barstool and a whole bunch of them because Kellen Mond was a decent quarterback. They went 9-1. They destroyed the Western Conference. They destroyed the West besides Bama, and that's what they believe that this year is going to be. They believe they have a serviceable.
Kellen Mond's one of the top passers in A&M history.
Exactly. But they believe this. They believe that Max Johnson is a serviceable quarterback that can reach Kellen Mond heights. They believe their offensive line, because they shut down Will Anderson, that they're going to be really good in that particular area. They believe that their talent is going to make up for the loss of productivity because 2020 they lost a lot of guys in their offensive line, and they were still really good in 2021. So they're banking off of that loss of productivity that they had with the talent that's going to be in, because they have gotten better. I'll give them that. They've gotten way better as far as their talent compared to when they stepped inside the conference. So they believe that loss of productivity will make up for it with the talent that's coming in there. So it's just they're high off of that in that recruiting class, and they're filling their heads with these unreasonable expectations where the expectation should be 8-4. Just sit up here and say, you know what? Maybe next year in 2023, if we can get another recruiting class to stack on top of this, maybe that could be the year we can compete. But no, this is a rebuilding year for A&M. They're replacing some of their coaching staff. They're replacing a lot of productivity from the offense, from not just the offense side of the ball, but the defense side of the ball, which A&M fans don't want to mention that the reason why they were so competitive in 2021 was because of their defense being good for 3 straight years, because a lot of those core guys for those 3 years were on that team from last year that beat Bama. They were there those last 3 years, and they were there as far as productivity-wise, producing and getting a lot of sacks. All of them are gone now, and you're going to sit up here and tell me that they can replace all that productivity with backup players as freshmen? No way. So again, this is A&M's fault. They have set themselves up for failure, and it's just the reason why when everything crashes down and they're 6-6 and 7-5, they have nothing to blame but themselves. We see it every single year, and we laugh at the fan base that does it because not even particularly at the team. We laugh at the fan base because they were responsible for why their team was the way it is.
Yeah, Texas A&M fans, Texas A&M better be ready for some disappointment. I, however, am disappointed though because that game's on October 8th, which is going to be OU Texas weekend. There's a good chance both those teams are going to be undefeated, and we're not going to get game day because game day is going to Tuscaloosa. Doesn't matter if A&M hasn't won a single game. They're going to Tuscaloosa for that game because they want to be able to give Nick Saban all the ammo to go out there and make a showcase. So,
yeah.
But on that note, we are done after this gauntlet of over-under. Man, that took a long time. It took a lot longer than the Pac-12. Forgot there were 14 teams of the SEC. So, but before we head out, do you guys have anything else that you guys want to say? Maybe reiterate where everybody can find you guys.
Yeah, man, you can find me at Around the Table Sports on YouTube. Right after I get off of this, I'm actually already have my little notes. I'm recording a Richard Young video, and you can look for that this evening. I guess if by the time this is out, go to my channel, you'll find it. My head's going to be so big in that video. You have no idea. I can't wait. But man, this is always so much fun. Preston, thank you for having me on. Your channel is taking off, man. And if y'all have gotten to this point and you haven't subscribed, I just genuinely don't know what you're doing. So go ahead and subscribe to Preston's channel. He's absolutely next.
Oh yeah, man. Like I said, yeah, Preston, you've done a phenomenal job with this channel, man. Like I said, this thing's blowing up, man. There's no question about it, man. I appreciate you for having me on the show, man. This is fun. It's definitely a fun topic, talking some SC ball. It's been a minute, so definitely great to be on the show, man. But like I said, you guys can find me if you guys want. Jance Sports on YouTube. You can catch me at Buffalo Fan Base every Tuesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6:00 Central Time, and for the most part, Twitter, Jance716. If you guys want to catch me on there, because I'll be on them Twitter Spaces, and if A&M fans, if you want to come argue with me like I've done over the last week, you guys absolutely can. But I'll just say this as my last remark. To quote the great DeMarvin Lill, I came to A&M to beat Bama. not to win national championships. So I'll leave that with that, A&M fans. You guys can take that how you will. If you guys have the expectation that you guys are going to be 11-1, absolutely fine. We'll see what happens We'll see what happens during the 2022 season. I will be there, so we could definitely chat it up. We could definitely meet it there. And yes, that's all I got to say.